to another edition of Technique Tuesday. Today I want to show you a technique that's called Mishima. Mishima is actually, it's kind of the opposite of sgraffito. The way it works is that you carve in to your project, you paint it with underglaze, and you can paint it messy, and then you take a tool and you will scrape off the surface and the color will remain in the lines that you've carved. So that's the basics, and I'll just do it quickly with you, and you'll be able to use it on your projects. So I've carved a fairly intricate design all around my piece here, and it would be really difficult to fire this and then try to keep color just in those little tiny lines. So that's why I'm going to use Mishima. So I'm going to finish up this last section of carving. When I carve, I want to keep my carving fairly deep because I'm going to be scraping the surface. So I'm just using a little sgraffito tool here, but I'm going to be scraping off the surface of this clay. So I want to keep my carving fairly deep. You can use any size line or shape to do this. No real limits on the size of the line. You can go teeny tiny or you can go fairly large. The key is there has to be enough space for the underglaze to get in there. And I'm carving into this while the clay is leather hard and it has not been fired yet, obviously, or else I would not be able to carve into it. So that was my last little section, so now I'm ready to paint. I'm using electric blue underglaze today. So I'm just gonna do what I always do. I do 3 coats of underglaze, and then I'll show you how to scrape. 3 coats, making sure to let it dry between coats. And I'm gonna keep in mind that my goal is really just to get the paint or the glaze in the lines. So if it's not a line like down here at the bottom, I don't need to be real super precise. I also don't need to paint this portion up here because I didn't do any carving up here. So I only really need to get the glaze where my lines are. So otherwise, I can miss a few spots as long as I'm getting it down in those lines that I carved. So I'll do 3 coats of this, and then I'll show you how to scrape. Okay, there's my 3 coats. And I'm just going to let this dry. I want to make sure I don't let the clay dry out because then scraping will be much more challenging. So I just want the underglaze to dry. So you know, if you do this in a period and you don't get to do the scraping yet, then you need to do something to keep it from drying out. So you can put it in a bag, you can put it in your clay box, but just don't let the clay dry out. You just want the underglaze to get dry. So I'm going to let this dry while I get to do some cleanup here, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, we're back. I have let my container that I'm decorating, I've let it dry. While I was letting it dry, I went ahead and cleaned up my space. Put tools away, clean the brush out, all that good stuff. Just trying to use time efficiently. And then, so now, what I'm going to do is take a non-serrated scraping rib, okay, metal rib, and I'm going to bend it like this while I scrape the sides of my container. And what will happen is it will scrape the surfaces, but the lines, because they're lower than the areas where I did not carve, the lines will stay my underglaze color. So I'm just going to start scraping. And it's better to scrape lightly many times than it is to try to dig at the thing, because if I dig it, it's going to mess up my lines. So I'm just going to, you can see what's happening. It's leaving the lines blue and scraping off the surface. So I'm just going to scrape around this whole thing until all the blue on the surfaces is gone. Okay, so I'm just about ready to finish up here. This is my last little section of scraping I need to do, and I just want to show you a couple of things to help make this a more successful endeavor. So what you want to do when you're scraping, you want to use the flat side of the rib, and you want to make sure you're curving it while you're scraping. So see how it's bending? And you want to scrape going along the lines. So rather than scraping this way across these lines, I want to scrape this way, going the length of the line. Or I can scrape on the diagonal. But either way, you want to make sure that you're not digging out those lines while you're scraping. And make sure that you occasionally push the little scraps aside so that you are not resting your project in those and getting them all over your work. So last little bit here, and then I'll let you look at it up close. Alright, there you go. There are my beautiful blue lines. And of course, when it fires, the clay will be white and the lines will come out blue. So this will be a nice high contrast piece. So that's Mishima. It's kind of the opposite of Sgraffito, and I hope you guys will give it a shot.
You can use Mishima for intricate, detailed patterns, for drawing pictures, whether they're simple or more complicated. Combine Mishima with text. Create random, natural-looking patterns. You can also combine Mishima with stamps or impressions.